Former Lieutenant Governor and champion of disability rights, David Onley, as he is laid to rest.
He believed that the Lieutenant Governor's office could be a transformational force for good.
He was gentle, kind, caring, and always home for dinner.
Family, friends, and dignitaries gathering to honor Onley, remembering him as a tireless advocate, role model, and a devoted family man. Plus,
without cell service, it's harder because you can't tell anyone where you are.
Cell service on the TTC. With the recent spike in violence, many say it would make them feel safer. So what's standing in the way? And the city under an extreme cold weather alert tonight. Warming centers have opened up as temperatures dip to dangerous lows. We'll tell you how long this chill will last. Good evening, I'm Kelda Yoon. Former Lieutenant Governor David Onley was laid to rest today. Family and friends, dignitaries, and colleagues gathered at a state funeral this morning to honor him. In addition to his work in politics, Onley was also a broadcaster, author, and a tireless advocate for people with disabilities. Greg Ross has more on his life and how he's being remembered.
David Onley's casket was draped in a Canadian flag as it was carried into York Minster Park Baptist Church this morning. There to celebrate his life, a who's who of politicians.
We're just here to honor a great person, a great man.
He was an activist, but he was such a decent human being and just helped so many people in his life by his model, but also just by his attitude.
But politics was only one part of Onley's life. He spent 2 decades working as a broadcaster, most notably with City TV, something his oldest son Jonathan says he was often recognized for when they were out in public.
One day we were out shopping, and as so often happened, a man came up to us, visibly excited. "Hey, City Pulse!" He said, I know you. You're Jojo Chinto." Dad just smiled and said, "Yeah."
What Onley may be best remembered for is the tireless work he did for people with disabilities. Onley was diagnosed with polio at 3 years old, leaving him partially paralyzed. He used a motorized scooter and a cane, something always visible while he worked on television.
He was such a role model and a mentor to so many of us in the disability community. He really mainstreamed disability conversations in Canada. He didn't shy away from the difficult conversations. He called out discrimination.
He used his platform to fight for disabled rights and accessibility.
When he became Lieutenant Governor, he made it his mission to be the first Lieutenant Governor to put accessibility at the forefront. So just an incredible Canadian.
But his family remembers him as an incredible husband and father.
If Dad can do what he's done as a disabled man, what can I do as a fully able-bodied man?
He is survived by his wife Ruth Ann and his 3 sons, Jonathan, Robert, and Michael. Onley died earlier this month at the age of 72. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Another political force is also being mourned. Hazel McCallion passed away yesterday at the age of 101. She served as mayor of Mississauga from 1978 to 2014, 36 years, becoming a beloved icon of the city. Alicia Chiasson has more on the legacy that Hurricane Hazel left behind.
I think she's like the Queen. I think we thought she would live forever, but I want to share with you that she will always live forever in our hearts.
Having served 12 consecutive terms as mayor of Mississauga, Hazel McCallion is often referred to as the architect of the city that was born out of farmland when she first entered politics in the 1970s.
You built a city that we chose to live, to work, to invest in, to raise our children in.
During her 36 years at City Hall, Mississauga was a sea of subdivisions and industry, earning her the other nickname, the Queen of Sprawl.
In a way, her administration are responsible for all the development that has taken place in Mississauga. So when you were Hazel McCallion, you couldn't say, well, it's because of what happened before me. And no, it all happened under a mandate, which is pretty unique.
But city planning professor Pierre Fillon notes that McCallion eventually changed course, laying the groundwork for the Mississauga we see today as the city builds more housing and transit.
She was a queen of sprawl for over a period, but then she switched towards having intensification. And she became, in fact, an advocate of urban intensification from the 2000s onwards.
But it's the personal impact she made on the people that brought many to City Hall to sign the Book of Condolences.
It was incredible. The mayor of Mississauga, she's a people person.
Longtime community volunteer Queenie Chun sent a wedding invitation to the mayor on a whim, and sure enough,
Hazel showed up. She inspired me and made me realize that I could be brave and I could be okay in a man's world.
She inspired Mississauga's current mayor to run, and maybe future mayors.
As somebody who's short like me, she was also a very short woman, and I really look up to her that way because she did amazing things. She lived such a long life, and she's absolutely inspiring for me.
She was small in stature, but she made up for big personality and big ideas.
Absolutely. That's almost a lot like me, to be honest.
In her 101 years, Hazel McCallion quite literally paved the way for Mississauga and its people. What was her secret?
Boy, sure, if we knew the secret, we would bottle it.
Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Mississauga.
The City of Toronto is implementing additional measures to keep the TTC safe after a recent surge in violence on transit. Now, starting this week, the city will add more than 20 community safety ambassadors. Now, these employees will work directly with people experiencing homelessness to provide outreach services. More than 50 security guards will also be temporarily added across the transit system. Now, they will all have training in mental health first aid, overdose prevention, and nonviolent crisis intervention. Last week, Toronto Police announced the addition of 80 police officers who are now patrolling the TTC daily. Now, some suggest cell service on the subway could be a way to help riders feel safer. So what's standing in the way? Talia Ricci takes a look.
These days, some people are too spooked to even take the subway.
I never take it anymore. I'm just too scared to get on.
The TTC is increasing security as violent incidents rise. It says all of the subway stations have Wi-Fi, but some riders say having access to cell service underground would help.
Safety is primary, and that would be one of my interests to have it.
Without cell service, it's harder because you can't tell anyone where you are.
We deal with a lot of vulnerable people.
The Assaulted Women's Helpline says they saw a rise in calls after the incidents on the TTC. Yvonne Harding says having access to cell service could help vulnerable people who take transit feel more connected.
Maybe I'm concerned about the person, someone is harassing me, and I don't want to pull that alarm bell. I don't feel that I want to draw that level of attention to myself, but maybe I can call or text or be in connection with someone who I feel safe. Meet me at my exit.
Back in 2019, cell service expanded on the TTC when BAI Communications installed the infrastructure to provide cellular coverage throughout the subway system. The company says it's eager to work with all carriers to provide cellular access to TTC riders, but so far only Freedom Mobile has signed on.
There's an obligation with significant monopolies like these to think collaboratively in the public interest because of your enormous market power.
The TTC says it welcomes all major telecom companies to sign on to its infrastructure. We asked the major networks whether they would. Rogers and TELUS didn't answer that question. Bell says it remains committed to building its own 5G network in the subway. Adding, but the TTC has done a 20-year exclusive cellular network deal with BAI Communications for the Toronto subway system, which prevents Bell from installing its own infrastructure.
It's almost like each company has their arms folded and they're reluctant to participate unless they can install their own equipment. Well, that's really not the mindset. So I think the time has come for leadership by the mayor to have a meeting with the providers and work collaboratively and cooperatively and bring Toronto from 1995 to 2023.
Riders agree, though it'll likely be a long time before we're making calls underground.
It's 2023, right? We have cell service everywhere, and why not put it in the subways? Simple.
Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
Extreme cold warnings are in place for a huge swaths of the country right now, including here in Toronto. Now, in preparation for a blast of frigid temperatures, the city is expanding the number of warming centers that are open tonight. A combined 142 spaces are available for walk-in at Scarborough Civic Centre, Metro Hall, Mitchell Field Community Centre, and Cecil Community Centre. The city is asking residents to call 311 if you see an unhoused person who may need street outreach assistance. All right, let's go to Kim McDonald now from the Weather Network with a first check on your forecast. And Kim, temperatures really dipping as we head into the overnight.
Everyone is starting to talk about the cold, and for good reason, Calda. It is because temperatures have been mild so far since winter began. We've had a few cold days, but nothing like what we're going to experience in the long-range forecast. So let's get rid of this snow for now. Any snow that falls over the next few days, most of it will be adjacent to Georgian Bay and Lake Huron, the typical lake effect snows that we see, but nothing particularly strong or heavy. So that's good news. No big storms coming through. Temperature will be the story, and it begins in the overnight. Now, for Windsor, tomorrow morning will be your coldest morning. For Toronto, it will be a little bit later in the week. So here we go, minus 19 in Windsor through the overnight with clear skies. You don't have these lakes moderating your temperature. Minus 12 in Toronto will feel like minus 20 through the overnight. Windsor feels like minus 27, so it's very cold. This is how you start your day. Minus 11 in Toronto, much colder in Windsor, and then temperatures will feel colder with the wind chill.
Thanks so much, Kim. As the weather gets colder, advocates are calling on the city to do more to help those who are unhoused. They are also hoping the city will finally recognize that clearing homeless encampments does more harm than good. This after a recent court decision that denied a request from the region of Waterloo to evict a homeless encampment in Kitchener. Patrick Swadden reports.
Housing advocates have long condemned the clearing of encampments. And in Ontario, they may have just gotten a breakthrough in a Kitchener court ruling.
It recognizes that homeless people are human beings deserving of charter protection.
Ontario's Superior Court denying a Region of Waterloo application to remove tents from a Kitchener encampment. Justice Valente says that when there aren't enough shelter spaces, removing tents is a violation of residents' rights to life, liberty, and security of the person. Longtime housing advocate and lawyer Leilani Farha saying similar decisions have come out of British Columbia, but that this is a first for Ontario.
It should send a message to municipalities across the province that evicting people living in homeless encampments infringes charter rights where they do not have an appropriate shelter space to go to.
And that's a big deal, says this housing advocate, because in cities like Toronto, there aren't enough spaces. He says the most recent numbers show that there are 10,700 people actively homeless in the city, with only about 9,200 beds to accommodate them.
More than 1,500 people are homeless every night without access to shelter space in Toronto. And so, scattering them to the four winds, leaving nowhere for them to sleep is not appropriate.
It comes as Toronto continues to clear encampments throughout the city.
This is the worst I've seen it. This is absolutely the most people that are out on the street homeless, the fewest spaces for them, and the city is actually cracking down worse than ever.
Hatlam says clearing encampments is dangerous because more overdoses happen when people are scattered and unable to look out for each other.
We've had multiple people over the course of 2022, for instance, found frozen and dead in ravines. And other people die in fires and so forth. That did not happen in the larger encampments.
Both say the only clear solution is long-term affordable housing.
The judge is really clear. This isn't just about the number of spaces. It's about the barriers that attach to those spaces.
CBC reached out to the Toronto Ombudsman's office, but they declined to comment as there is an ongoing investigation into how the city clears encampments. Patrick Swadden, CBC News, Toronto.
Welcome back. An early morning crash in Brampton sent 2 people to hospital, including a Peel police officer. A Peel police cruiser was involved in the 2-vehicle crash around 3 o'clock this morning. It happened near Rutherford and Orenda roads. The male police officer and the person in the other car were both treated in hospital and have since been released. Police say the man driving the other vehicle was arrested for dangerous driving and other offenses. Toronto police have identified the man who was stabbed to death in downtown Toronto on Sunday. 26-year-old Nelson Nyongabo was found with several stab wounds near Sherbourne and Dundas yesterday afternoon. He died of his injuries at the scene. 31-year-old Rashid Ali has been arrested and charged with second-degree murder. He is in police custody while he waits for a bail hearing. Anyone with information is asked to contact investigators. The future of bike lanes on a section of Yonge Street was the subject of debate at City Hall today. A key council committee voted to recommend the lanes between Bloor and Davisville to be made permanent. Now, they've also adopted a motion to ask staff to study ways to increase traffic safety in that area. Municipal Affairs reporter Sean Jeffords has more.
Dozens of people spoke to Toronto's Infrastructure Committee today about a set of controversial Midtown bike lanes on Yonge Street. The lanes have been piloted since 2021 between Bloor and Davisville. City staff say cycling trips in the corridor are up nearly 60% and the lanes should be made permanent. But that doesn't sit well with a number of residents who say congestion has been a problem. Resident Trevor Townsend challenged Deputy Mayor Jennifer McKelvey to look at the gridlock.
We've got 2 lanes and a major artery going north and south in our neighborhood, and we've got congestion and we've got serious concerns about response times with our fire and emergency crews.
Alicia Mitchell says the congestion caused by the pilot held up an ambulance trying to get her to hospital last May. She says the pilot isn't working.
Lives should prevail over bike lanes. It's really, really important. I love biking. In the past, I've done my biking. I'm not here to object to biking, but there's a time and a place, and it needs to be set up for success.
But a number of deputants also spoke up in favor of making the lanes permanent. Marjorie Nicol says the bike lanes have made the community safer. Before them, she was too afraid to ride her bike on Yonge.
For the past several months, I have been able to safely go shopping and dining in a neighborhood that I have avoided in the past.
Aubrey and her brother Nick asked the committee to adopt the plan.
Pretty soon I'll be graduating to a bigger bike, and I won't be able to ride on the sidewalks. I'm excited but also scared. I will be on the streets with cars and trucks. I'm with only a helmet to protect me. I don't think that's a safe idea. So I'm asking you today to please support bike lanes in Midtown and all over Toronto.
Alison Stewart of Cycle Toronto says expanding the cycling network will benefit the entire city.
These projects are great examples of what Toronto can accomplish when we prioritize making our streets safer, more enjoyable to visit, and more accessible for people of all ages and abilities.
Deputy Mayor Jennifer McKelvey says city staff are recommending that the lanes become permanent, but she acknowledged that there may need to be changes.
But it is important that we do continue to listen to residents and maybe see if there are some areas that can be approved along the corridor. But this project is important because it is contributing to our cycling network plan.
The committee's recommendations will next go before City Council on February 6th for further debate. Sean Jeffords, CBC News, Toronto.
Legendary hockey player Bobby Hull has died at the age of 84. Now, Hull, who played professional hockey from 1957 to 1980, helped the Chicago Blackhawks win the Stanley Cup in 1961. He was also named the NHL's most valuable player twice and won the league scoring title 3 times. One of the most prolific goal scorers in NHL history, Hull's slap shot was so powerful it was once clocked at 193 kilometers per hour. And when he joined the Winnipeg Jets of the rival World Hockey Association in 1972, he became the first player ever to sign a contract worth $1 million. But while he was a fan favorite, he was also a controversial figure. Hull faced many allegations of domestic abuse and racism over the years. In 1986, he was convicted of assaulting a police officer who intervened in a dispute between Hull and his wife at the time. Hull was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1983. Stay with us. We'll be right back. All right, let's go back to Kim now for a look at your extended forecast. And Kim, these bitterly cold temperatures, unfortunately, expected to last through much of the week.
Kelda, if your extra thick parka is parked somewhere in your home, where you don't have access to it, go dig that out because it is getting cold, especially through the overnight. My goodness, if you're in Windsor, the overnight temperature is going to feel closer to -25. This is Tuesday afternoon. So let's get into this. -7 in Toronto, -7 in Hamilton. That's about 5 degrees colder than average. We're usually around -2 this time of year. -7 will feel like -12 with the wind chill. It'll feel like -14 if you're in Windsor or London. We talk about the polar vortex. It is a real thing, and it usually hangs out in the Arctic where it should, so in the far north. However, it's moving south. We won't see these kinds of temperatures. Look at this. In Rankin Inlet, -38 will feel like -56. We're not going to get that cold, but we will have our coldest air of the season and possibly break records or see temperatures that we haven't seen since 2016. Okay, so there is the polar vortex at its worst. Eastern Ontario, Western Quebec. That's where it will be very cold. We're not going to get that bad, but it'll be cold for us because we're not used to it. So a front moves through, there goes our snow. This is just illustrating the little systems that are coming through. For the most part, we're talking about flurries this week. No big snowstorms to contend with. On Thursday, the winds are going to pick up. You're going to start to feel it. Thursday won't be particularly cold. We've had a warm January. This is just showing you that temperatures have been about 5 degrees above seasonal. But after Thursday, look at this, -1. The high on Friday is -14. The low is -23, and that low is overnight into Saturday morning. So that -23 or -24 could rival that -26. That's the coldest temperature we've seen since the year 2000. Here's a look at your 7-day in Windsor. Again, as we head towards the weekend, that's when we're going to have our coldest temperatures and our most bitter wind chills.
Thanks so much, Kim. Finally tonight, a rare green comet is flying past Earth this week, and it won't be back for another 50,000 years. Now, the comet went around the sun 2 weeks ago and is now on its way out of the solar system. It will be nearest to the Earth on Wednesday. Scientists say it is green because of specific gases that light up when hit by rays from the sun. It should be visible to the naked eye if the sky is clear and there is minimal light pollution. And that is our show for you tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you back here tomorrow night at 11. Have a great night, everyone.